Namaste. You have anything? Do you have anything? Let's see if I can formulate this. Often there are events in our life occur, say an event in our life occur. It may be a fearful event, it may be something that we never want to happen again, and it becomes set in form, and it looks real. It looks like it's a part of our life. And so we want to avoid anything that looks like it. So for example, we have a bad experience as a child. And so we kind of place it in consciousness and says, anything that appears to look like that, we want to avoid. We don't want to have any part of it ever again. And so it becomes real, and it becomes, so to speak, part of the way we live our life. That's the form. Huh? So knowing that those things happen, that's kind of the way the mind works. The mind has created it. We've had an experience. The mind has formed it. And then the mind in the Brahma, Vishnu, and is sustaining it. It looks real, and everything comes from that. We can't see around it. We can't see through it because we're now identified with it as being real. And that's the way we live most of our lives. True? And that's
the way most people live their lives, yes.
So what we can do, when we're recognizing it, this is the area where we really have to start being aware that that's the way it's occurring. And you always say just see through it. So what you were sharing this morning is the place that you're seeing through it as and from. So there isn't anything...
It's a matter of coming to this ability to see through the situation. When you're identified with it, you don't have the ability to see through it. You have to release your identification with it. Now, the only way you can release your identification with it is when you're able to make the distinction in consciousness between the awareness that you are, which is always present, always prior to what you are taking yourself to be. We usually, out of habit and long identification, we take ourselves to be the body and the mind. We take ourselves to be the formless, the formed being of this, of the body and the mind, as though that is in fact who and what we are. Now that is a strong and long held habit. It requires our hearing the truth. The hearing of the truth, when it is heard as spoken or directed to our consciousness by one who is conscious, is the first stirring of the awareness that we are. Prior to a stirring of the awareness that can break us free from. even if only momentarily, from the body-mind identification. And that's when we have when we have the good fortune to come into the company of one who has awakened. Satsang, darshan. And to hear the message of truth. Now, the message of truth simply is that consciousness is before anything else is. If we were not conscious, we wouldn't be able to be conscious that we have a body. But we don't usually recognize our having a body and our ability to see the body as actually occurring in the awareness that is prior to the body. We don't usually see that. Again, due to the habit of identifying with form or with the body itself. But when we hear the message of truth, that consciousness must be before anything else can be, and we begin to look at that and consider that and contemplate, well, what is consciousness? And what is the difference between consciousness as formlessness and consciousness in form? And we begin to have a curiosity, an interest in knowing that. Or maybe it's just an interest in having a closer relationship with God, a deeper understanding of God and who and what is God. That in itself can begin the stirring. And usually that begins the stirring as a result of suffering that is occurring. When we begin to look to the higher power or for a higher power in order to free us from our suffering. And when we begin that quest, the quest of better understanding our true relation, well, let's say God and our true relationship with God, or consciousness and our relationship with consciousness. That's really the beginning of our spiritual practice. Giving attention to that which is more than just the events occurring in our world, the mundane experiences of everyday life in the world. There will be a progression in that process based upon to what extent our suffering is motivating us to move into a higher understanding of our relationship with God, or our interest in better understanding the true nature of the being that we are. Again, that can stem from suffering as well. And often it is either way, it's from suffering. It's the grace is the suffering. Suffering is the grace, because otherwise there will be nothing to motivate us to move to a higher level of, a higher state of consciousness. Now, we don't usually look at grace or at suffering as being the result of grace in our life, because what we're looking for is to eliminate the suffering. But the suffering is grace. Otherwise, we may not be motivated to eliminate the suffering, to overcome or to transcend the suffering in our life. that do anything for you?
Ramana, these tendencies, these tendencies are so strong that it even carries forward, like it, even after the death of the body, it kind of carries. And they say you're born again with these same vasanas.
And
And again you're reborn with the same vasanas for you to get over it, probably. I don't know. But even that momentary silence or the momentary realization of
Momentary. In the
realization
moment.
of what the truth is, can it do something to erase those impressions?
if we have the good fortune of hearing the truth, particularly the truth that we're sharing here, if we can hear and understand and practice the truth that is being shared here, which is the truth that Bhagavan Ramana has shared with the world. The way to free ourselves from these tendencies, these patterns, is to withdraw the sense of I that has the patterns, the sense of I being the mind, the ego that has these patterns, back into the source out of which the ego or the sense of I has risen into time and space and is in that form of identification with the body, and thereby is sustaining and maintaining these patterns, these conditioned patterns. It is the I itself. We wouldn't have these patterns without the sense of I, the ego, the body-mind that is holding these patterns. And then the paradox is that these patterns are also holding the sense of I in existence.
It's a vicious circle.
Yes. So both are happening in self-embracing one another. The patterns are embracing the sense of I, and the sense of I is embracing the patterns. So it's a self-sustaining process. But we must withdraw that entire configuration, which is the sense of I itself, primarily, back to the source out of which the sense of I rises into apparent time and space. And recognizing, as we do, which will happen with the process, it'll just happen, that we will begin to recognize that the sense of I does not exist in the pure awareness of being. It is the pure awareness of being is the source out of which the sense of I rises. And when we return it back to the source, that in itself will work as a catalyst, a releasing agent that will free us from the patterns first. The patterns will begin to dissolve, and eventually leaving only this sense of I, and then keep the process going by returning the sense of I back into the pure awareness, to eventually the sense of I itself will dissolve, leaving the pure awareness of being, which is the self. Okay?
Yes, it's a whole process. It doesn't happen just momentarily. Yes, it's a start, but the process has to go on.
Well, here's the point. The tendency may be a tendency, as you were saying, that you have had from previous lifetimes. So it's thereby strongly ingrained in consciousness and held in the mind and enforced also as a repetitiveness that is lived habitually in the body-mind, in the body with the mind.
Yes, and we draw situations which kind of attract this and increase this.
And by being there as a pattern in consciousness, it will continue to draw to itself all manner of events to sustain it, to keep it alive in its form,
Right.
you see. So what has to occur is we must sadhana, spiritual practice, to eliminate it. Again, that's where the suffering comes in, is the motivator to get free of it. And that's where the grace is from the suffering as the motivator to get us free of it. Now, it would seem that it takes time to eliminate it. And in a manner of speaking, it's like taking time. But really, it's not time that it takes. It's the readjusting or returning and maintaining this pure, this sense of I that has the patterns back into the pure awareness of being. If we keep returning the sense of I back into the pure awareness of being, the pure awareness of being is what works to graciously relieve us of the pattern. And it doesn't take the time, it just takes the returning. Keep returning the sense of I back into the pure awareness of being. It's just an adjustment that it takes from extending the sense of I externally into the world and keeping it there, holding or sustaining the pattern. But return it so it's not sustaining the pattern, and it will be dissolving the pattern. You don't have to do anything more to dissolve the pattern. The grace of the pure awareness of being will dissolve the pattern. The self will dissolve the pattern. Okay? Are we all getting this?
So it's like when you're chopping down a tree, you cut some of the outside branches off, but when you really go to do it, you take the root out. You don't keep taking everything down.
Exactly.
And the rest of it falls on its own.
Exactly.
So when we're talking about forming consciousness, creating a happy end of the movie,
Well, you might say those methods we've introduced in Aham in past times, and we can still use that. But what you're doing there when you're talking about creating the happy end of the movie is using the mind in a more beneficial way to allow consciousness to imbibe of the thought feeling that will accommodate the way you would prefer a situation to be. So that's still using the mind then. Whereas in the inquiry, just returning the mind to the source out of which the mind rises is not using the mind in the refiguration. The pure awareness of being itself gives us what is most beneficial to us in the moment. Okay?
oh yeah.
Ramana. And the more often we are in the pure awareness of being or presence, the more capacity we develop within to be able to dissolve the I more. So the capacity builds with that strength of being able to remain in the presence, in the pure awareness of being. So the capacity is there to dissolve the I when it's, and perhaps to see through the I when it does present.
Yes, exactly. The more you remain in the awareness, attending to or remaining or abiding in the awareness, as opposed to giving attention externally to the body, mind, and the world, the more you stay in the awareness, the more the pure awareness is dissolving the patterns and tendencies that keep the mind externalized, that keep attention externalized onto the thoughts, feelings, objects, situations, experiences that sustain the sense of I itself as the sense of I, as a seeming entity living in time and space. The real message, the high message of truth, to be seen and to be gotten, is that there is no individual being that we are taking ourselves to be. We must get it that the one reality is the supreme being, the pure awareness that is always, already, only one, not two. But we must look to see how strong the habit is of identifying with the body and the mind as a seeming entity living in time and space, a seeming person, a seeming individual living in time and space, and having all of these adventures, all of the patterns of likes and dislikes, that which is okay and that which is not okay. We must see that the sense of I that we're taking ourselves to be is a false assumption. It's just a shadow, a seeming entity that is an illusion. It's a dream, really. But while we're identified with it and engaged in its activity, we usually don't see that. It's not easy to see that this self that we're taking ourselves to be, the separate self that we're taking ourselves to be, which is nothing more than the entity that is identified with the body and the mind, because we have a body and we have a mind, which is nothing more than a vehicle for this sense of I in time and space. That all of this is occurring in the prior awareness, which is the very self, the true self, that we are. But we're not seeing that. So the inquiry process of Sri Bhagavan Ramana, and that we teach in Aham, is the one direct and immediate way to begin to see that this self we think we are is not the self we really are. And this occurs by the means of what we've just shared, that has been shared here so far. All right? Got it? any of you gentlemen who speak Tamil feel that you're not necessarily adequate in asking a question in English, I bet Sujata would be very willing to take your question and share it with me, and then serve as a translator. Tell them what I just said.
இதான் கேள்வி கேட்கணும் அப்படின்னு கேட்க முடியல தோணு எப்படி கேட்குறதுன்னு தெரியலன்னாக்கா தமிழில் சொன்னீங்கன்னா அவர் புரியுற மாதிரி சொல்லுங்க.
I'm not sure what the saying is on the bookmark, but it's something about lay your burdens at the feet of the master or something. What is it? That's exactly what you're doing when you're inquiring.
Yes. I don't remember the saying fully myself, but
He knows the future, the past.
We kind of all know this to be true, because if we ever have a problem and we're trying to figure it out, trying to think it through, trying to analyze it, trying to look at all the alternatives, it's that old feeling of you're stuck no matter which way you turn. You're never going to find a solution that's going to present it all, because it's come ridden already with that sense of identification that needs it to be something.
well, our problems have all been created by the sense of I, by the ego,
Exactly.
the mind. So that which creates the problem is not going to solve the problem. Its very function is such that if it were to solve the problem, then it would have no reason to exist. What a paradox. Somewhere I can't remember where Bhagavan Ramana talks about the dream state and the waking state. The three states of dream, waking, and the deep sleep state. Now, the sense of I is present in two of those states, the waking state and the dream state. It's not present in the deep sleep state. Yet the self that we are, pure being, is present in the deep sleep state. The sense of I that creates the waking state and the dream state and sees the events that are occurring in either of the states while the states are being experienced. The mind that creates the state is also going to create the events of the state and see the events as logical, as credible, as real while they are occurring. Yet the two states of waking and dream are entirely different in one sense but they are the same in another. In other words, they operate in the same manner, but while they are occurring, then only one is occurring at a time. And the mind cannot see the other while we're engaged in either one, the one that we're engaged in. It cannot see the other. In other words, while we're dreaming, we're not seeing the waking state. We're not knowing the waking state. And the waking state has nothing to do with the dream state while we're dreaming. As an analogy, if we're thirsty in the dream state, then it takes dream water to quench the dream thirst. We may have had a glass of water just before lying down to go to sleep. And so the body itself is not thirsty. But the dream body, if it's thirsty, requires dream water to quench the dream thirst. This is the way the mind works. It creates the world in which we find ourselves, sustains the world in which we find ourselves, and gives a logical credibility to all of the events occurring in whatever state we find ourselves in. For example, again, if we are in the dream state, we may be having an experience, going through an experience in the dream state that would be very near, if not totally impossible for us in our waking state. But it's still credible and logical, and the ability is there to perform whatever it is during the dream state. Or conversely, it may be the other way around. Something that we're capable of doing in the waking state, we find ourselves incapable of doing in the dream state. I had that this morning. I had a dream just like that this morning. This morning I had a dream. I was reading. I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning, and I started reading. And during my reading, I dozed off and had a quick dream. And in this dream, I was in America. Of all things, I was in a vehicle that was operated like a trolley car, meaning the kind that has the hooked onto a line that draws the power from above. They used to have those in America.
Like a train with a...
Try.
Well, this was like a vehicle, just like an ordinary vehicle, but that's where it drew its power. And it wouldn't run, and I knew what it had to do. I had to go out and hook the pole or the rod to the power above in order to get it to run. And there was someone riding in it with me, and I told them that that's what we had to do. And for whatever the reason, I at the time did not have the ability to do that. It was just I knew in the dream I couldn't do that for whatever reason. So I was telling them to hook the rod to the overhead line. And then the scene changed. I was outside the vehicle, and I was myself then attempting to hook it. And here we were along the street, and there were these trolley cars going up and down, and we were holding up traffic. And here we are holding up traffic because I couldn't make the connection, and we were here in one of these trolley cars. So here I'm trying to hook it and I couldn't, and then the driver of a trolley car behind me came up and made the connection for me. And I thanked him profusely for helping me. And then there was a bunch of them come walking up as they stopped the cars from the other direction and behind me. And there must have been 8 or 10 trolley drivers, all wearing uniforms. What a dream. And then I was recognizing that here I am driving this vehicle, and I wasn't authorized to drive this vehicle. I shouldn't be driving it. And I was like pretending to be a driver, but I was wearing civilian clothes, and they were accepting that I was a driver, but then one of them began to question, who am I, that they didn't really recognize me as a driver. So then the scene changed. I got into the vehicle, and as I got into the vehicle, I couldn't use my legs. They would not move. And I had to lift my legs with my hands to move it over and move this one over, and then try to push the pedal to give power to move. I don't know what that was all about, and then I woke up. Now the paradox is, a week or so ago I was having a dream in which I was running up the stairs, and I was very capable of running upstairs 2 at a time. And I remember I was up on the 5th floor of this building that I had run up 5 floors of stairs. Very agile, and I couldn't even go up 1 flight of stairs now. So what a paradox. Just dreams. I do not give any credibility to any of these dreams. They were just what was taking place. There may be some that want to do that, but I don't do that for myself. My point being that when a dream is occurring, while it is occurring, it has the tone of reality. Even though it may not in the waking state be comparable to what is, it may not be comparable to anything that is real in the waking state as far as your personal life is concerned, but in the dream state, while the dream is going on, it's just as real as a waking state experience. That's how the mind works. That's how the mind creates a situation. And being able to see that, the main thing from this dream for me is just to see, which I don't need the proof, but the proof is there. The way something is created by the mind can have the appearance of solid, objective reality, independent of me, the dreamer, or of us, the dreamer, but nonetheless, it's still a product of our own imagination. It's a product of what we are seeing or perceiving the situation to be. For what it's worth, I didn't mean to put my dream on you.
Ramana, as you were sharing, what occurred to me was that the dream, we have about 20 minutes, the dreams in sleep, we just acknowledge that they just kind of look like they just appear. But this one looks like we have something to do with it.
Yes, but while the dream is occurring that we're having as the dream, during the dream it does not appear that it just appears.
That's right.
It's going on just as much as this is going on. It is no different during the dream as the so-called solidity of it, the so-called longevity of it, the long apparent duration of it,
And your role in it.
and your role in it is just as much real as this dream is real. We don't recognize sometimes that while the dream is occurring as a dream, there is the ability to remember events in the dream that extend back into an indefinite period of time, even over years of time. And we don't usually, or sometimes we don't see that. Often we don't see that, and we forget that. We only remember just the event of the moment and forget that we do have a memory in the dream, just like we appear to have a memory in this dream. We also in the dream can have a projected vision of the future that we may not recognize. Just like we have a projected dream of the future in this waking dream. The main point to get is that we are the awareness in which it's all occurring. Either dream, it doesn't matter. What is being revealed to me in this moment, for what it's worth, and this is for everyone to look at and benefit from if you choose to, it's up to you. Stay in the awareness, withdrawing the sense of I into the pure awareness of being. And experience for yourself the process of disengaging from body-mind identification. The more, as you're saying, Frank, the more you keep your attention attending to or remaining in the pure awareness of being. The natural process which occurs is the benefit of disengaging entirely and being able to feel it, feeling the disengagement from the body and the mind as being the self that we take ourselves incorrectly to be. This moment, I don't know whether I'm doing it for someone else or what. I've done it for myself a long time ago, but I'm feeling it occurring right now. Very strongly so. stillness and silence to remain as your natural state, making whatever effort is necessary. This is the pure state of the self. Remain in it, as it, and be happy. Namaste.